Battalion 1.
We just had a plane crash into Alpha 4 of the World Trade Center.
Welcome to Jack 2-3. When you see any movement in there, I want you to hit it. Out.
Roger. We're taking fire from roughly building 112,
421 eastbound, red Pontiac G6, near passenger, George Robert.
Car stand by. Car stand by. 50 officer.
Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, it was just a huge explosion.
33. We're outside the building. 744.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Watching the War. It has been a while, hasn't it, Brian?
It has. Too long. Excited to be back.
You want to go ahead and intro our guest for today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, super excited about our guest today. It's my former boss and Sheriff Dave Wedding. Long career with the Sheriff's Office. What'd you say, Dave? About 40 years total?
42 years.
Man, so what a long career. You know, I spent a little over 20, and it seemed like an eternity. And just what I saw change and evolve over my career, I can't imagine for as long as you're in what those changes look like for you and how we've seen things change. And really that's kind of what I want to dive in today after, you know, we hear a little bit more about you, but kind of where it used to be and, you know, how it's changed and then now where we are today and how do we get there and just having some real conversations based off of your experience. So again, yeah, just kind of give us a short bio on you, like how you started Sheriff's Office and how kind of your career went and, you know, where you ended up before you retired, and we'll jump into it.
Okay. Well, probably the oddest thing in my life, I was wanting to be a firefighter from the time I was a child until I stumbled into the Sheriff's Office. Back in the 70s, I grew up near a fire station. I was there all the time, developed a love for firefighting, and I thought that was going to be my career when I turned 21. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was very political. And if you didn't know the right people, you didn't have a chance. That's just the way it worked. Wasn't there a merit system? You just kind of got hired politically. So while I was waiting to see if I could get picked up by somebody through the political system, I had helped a lady who was running for county council while she was seeking office, and I worked hard for her, and she won. And she approached me and said, "Would you like to work at the Sheriff's Office while you're waiting to get hired by the fire department?" And I thought, well, you know, I'll try that out. And the irony with this was my brother was a newly appointed deputy sheriff at the time, and I was the youngest kid in the family with a little bit of wild streak in me still. And he didn't want no part of me coming to the sheriff's office because he thought I'd humiliate him by coming to the sheriff's office. So, but I took the job thinking, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to work in the jail. So I did, and I enjoyed it. And to contrast then versus now, I started in the old jail there at Martin Luther King and I think Sycamore Street. And we had 2 levels, felony floor, misdemeanor floor. We had about 175 prisoners when I started, January 1, 1981. It's kind of odd that New Year's Day, I'm a brand new jail officer. And you can imagine what a 21-year-old kid was doing New Year's Eve before his first day of work, right? 2 a.m., hey, I better get to work here or, you know, for too long. But that's just the way it was. We didn't have field training, nothing. You just went in and learned on the job. But it was a good learning experience. But the interesting thing was the small amount of inmates we had. And we probably brought in maybe 8 or 10 people per day under arrest, small crews working in the jail. But it was good. Things went real well. The jail was easy to run with that small amount of inmates in it. And as I worked in the jail for a couple of years, I was kind of a workhorse. I'm an energetic guy, and you know me well enough, kind of hyperactive, what most people would call me. But I just got a lot of energy. I like to work, and that's just what I've lived my whole life. So a lot of the older people in the sheriff's office start suggesting that I try to be a deputy sheriff. And I wasn't sure because I still wanted to be a firefighter. But in 1983, we had a sheriff's election. It had taken place in 1982, and the sheriff approached me and asked me if I wanted to be a deputy. And, you know, I had to think about it. And matter of fact, his deal was if he hired me and sent me to the academy, and I went to the fire department, he's going to be very angry. So I thought, okay. But on a handshake agreement, back in the old days, you shook somebody's hand and promised them something, you adhere to your promise, which they don't do nowadays, trust me. So, I'm his first deputy hired under his new administration. I go up there, young, dumb, punk kid, don't know what's going on, right? But I ended up 4th in my class. I did everything. The vice president of the class, had all the fitness stuff you could obtain. And I wanted to prove to him he hired the right person. So I started my career off pretty good because I tried real hard. I didn't take the job for granted. I wanted to prove to him he hired the right person. So in 1983, I became a deputy sheriff. But in those days, we still worked in the jail. Deputy sheriffs actually worked in the jail amongst the jail officers. And a year later, I became a transport officer, and my job was taking people to prison, picking people up on warrants and things like that. I did that for 3 years. Then after that, and I got a little burned out on that, back and forth the highway in Michigan City, Westville, Pendleton, Plainfield, day after day after day. It got to be a pain in the rear end. So I found my way to patrol, enjoyed that. And even in those days, we didn't get holiday pay. You worked Christmas, it was a day. You didn't get any overtime pay, and we enjoyed it. We loved. We didn't care, and you bounced around. You didn't get to pick your shift. You didn't sign up for what shift you wanted each year. They just said, "Hey, you're working this shift." 2 months later, you're working this shift. So you just worked what they sent you, and I was okay with it, because I found fun in every shift that I worked, and as I went along in the 80s, it was a good time, good generation. If you looked at our squad cars back in 1983 versus now, it's like spaceships versus Model Ts. We had no screens in our cars. We had a 2-channel radio, weird square light bars and things, maybe a spotlight on your car. We didn't have tasers and OC spray, nothing like that. We had D-cell batteries that couldn't hardly illuminate a room if you tried. So it was a much different way of working, but we accomplished our mission anyway. We learned how to be police. And a lot of, I said, our policing then versus now is we had good common sense policing. And we had people who loved the job. We didn't need to be trained on how to do, what to act as much as we do now. So our education was kind of, they threw you in the fire and you had to figure it out. We didn't have field training. You rolled around with the guy for about 5 or 6 weeks, you're on your own. No GPS to get you around. You had a big old 3-ring binder to page through to try to find an address where the, 16,000 block of Big Cynthiana Road's next to some red barn or something. That was my GPS. But you learned all the main coordinates, and but it was just a totally different lifestyle back then. We had like Smith & Wesson Model 19s back in those days, or Ruger Security 6s. So we had a 6-shot weapon, and you had maybe 12 rounds on your belt. We had a dump loader or a loop loader. You thought you was fancy, or maybe a speed loader. And now our deputies are carrying guns that have more ammunition in the weapon than we had on our entire body with 3 extra bags. And so a totally different thing. And we had the old Remington 870 shotgun. That was our big gun for the battle, right? So that was all we had. That was our equipment in those days.
Jeez. What a change from the career that I know, right? A piece that's close to my heart is, I want to hear about your canine experience, because obviously, we both work canines, and I think that is a huge, huge asset to law enforcement. It mitigates, I guess, a lot of the danger for officers going in houses and stuff. And, I think as a canine handler, you really appreciate how much those dogs do and the relationship you have with them and with your family and stuff. So as you moved from patrol, how did you get into canine?
Well, about the mid 80s or the late 80s, I was offered a chance to work in canine. I've been very adamantly asking that I would like to try out the canine, and I would give it a good home, and I'd work hard to do what it took to be a good canine handler. And so I was afforded the opportunity to pick up a dog. And so me, Danny Armstrong, and Butch Carl, we went up near Buffalo, New York, and we picked up 3 dogs in Buffalo, New York. And, they were all, I'll take this dog and I'll take that dog. And they kind of gave me what they thought was the worst dog of the bunch. and he ended up being the best dog of the bunch, so it's kind of tricks on them. And his name was Dax. He's about an 88-pound German Shepherd, friendly as can be. I still have pictures of us at the hotel room that night, jumping in my bed, hanging out with me. Instant bond, unbelievable bond between he and I. Friendly dog, but loved to bite. So I mean, his fun was biting people, And so for me as a handler, I had to be cognizant of that, and you had to make sure you made good decisions when the dog apprehended somebody, because the dog hurt people.
Right.
But he did a very good job. As a matter of fact, when we competed, and you're very familiar with the USPCA trials, the first trial we went to was in Mansfield, Ohio, and your first discipline is obedience. Top scores 120 points. And many people in the first trial, they may get 100, 105 or something, maybe less than that, because you give one command, they fail, 5-point deduction.
Right.
Well, we go out there first thing, Mansfield, Ohio, brand new high school football stadium, new grass and everything. I'm nervous as can be. And, the dogs can sense your nervousness, but he went out and nailed his obedience. We had a 117.3. I'll never forget it. And even the judge walking on the field said, "Kid, that was about as good as I've ever seen." Well, I got beat out by 17/100ths of a point for first place.
That's incredible.
Kind of pain in the rear end, But I was pretty excited that I brought a big old trophy home to Vanderbilt County. The very first trial, brand new canine handler, and he was an exceptional dog. And I was proud to bring that trophy home as part of Vanderbilt County's canine. We worked together well. He made some great apprehensions during his short career, because he died unexpectedly with a twisted intestine after having about 2 years.
Yeah, and that's horrible. And, for those guys that are not canines or in law enforcement, like how much work goes into having, and, it's a team, and people always say that we're the dummy at the end of the lead, and that's very accurate, right? But it is a team, and that bond is everything. And I think that, Bosco, which was my first canine, I think it was very similar to you and your dog, that relationship. And, when I first got him, I remember some of the old canine guys like, "Oh, he's just a tool. You keep him outside. You don't let him close to the family." I'm like, "No, I don't think we're going to do that." Because they're like, "It'll make him soft." Well, my dog was farthest from being soft.
I'm very aware of Bosco. He was not soft.
But it's just such a great tool. And it was probably the best time in my career.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing like having him behind you. And as you spend more time with that dog than you do with your family and your kids. So it's a big piece. And then, when they pass away, it's extremely difficult and how to move on. So you got a second dog after that.
Yeah, and then I got another dog, Manto. And Manto was a challenge. He and I didn't have near the bond that I had with Dax. He was capable, but he was cantankerous, and we'd been at a dog trial, I believe in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you're familiar with the article search, right? They throw maybe a piece of leather and a car key or a credit card in a square. I don't know what the dimensions of the square are, about knee-high grass.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take the dog out, off lead, send him in to search, call him back, hopefully with the two articles.
Right.
Well, Manto decides to go out there, stand in the center of the square, and stare at me for about the duration of the time. So they said, "Call your dog back." So I called him to heel, and I get 6 points out of 70. And so that dog got his little ass whooped on the way back to the squad car when I got to reach of everybody. And I mean, I've never been so humiliated in my life. And he was just a hard-headed dog. However, when we were in Broward County, Florida, a few years later, we got a top 20 honor in the National Dog Trials, which is a pretty good accomplishment. Anytime you get the top 20 National Dog Trial. And he was part of a team, a Region 5 team, with people from Indiana and I believe either Kentucky and Ohio, I believe. And we got third place nationally on a team because he had a pretty nice score. And we had a really good dog from Cincinnati. Kent Walker from EPD was on our team. So that was a pretty good honor as well. So he finally did something to lessen my headaches.
Yeah. As canine guys, we always joke, the dogs do all these things. You go to trial and you're like, he has never did that before. Like every canine guy's like, he's never did that before. And everyone's like, sure. Yeah. No, seriously. He's never did that to me before. It's almost like they know that's the time. Like, all right, Dad, I'm going to get you back for this. You're not going to do anything about it right now. Because you can't correct the dog during trials.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's like, they know like,
See, I'm very unfamiliar with that. I mean, even just hearing like good dogs and bad dogs, like I would think every dog that is working with a police department is probably like had some level to where they're, like a great dog. But I guess there are some, You know, you get good ones and bad ones like everything. I mean, just like a hunting dog or whatever.
Yeah,
Right?
well, we had one of our canines that we picked up in New York. He wouldn't bite. So you got dogs that are aggressive, bite too much, won't let go. This dog wouldn't bite the suspect.
Okay.
He'd be laying there, violent felon, and he'd just go up and look at him. He just would not bite. And even on a sleeve, he wouldn't bite the sleeve hard.
Will they pull them off? Like, hey, look, that's not going to work. We need you to bite people. And hey, nice try.
Yeah.
Get them out.
But we had to wash them out
Okay,
because
yeah.
that would be dangerous to the handler.
Sure.
Because that guy was sitting with a gun or a knife, and the dog didn't engage him, and he turned
Oh.
around and shot the handler.
Sure.
So you want the dog to engage somebody because you're out there a lot of times hundreds of yards away from your nearest help because you're going in looking for violent people and you don't know whether they're armed. You don't know what the state of mind is. They've committed a felony. And you want the dog to engage them. It's distraction so we can apprehend them without creating a dangerous environment for us.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Kind of what is, and again, forgive me for the ignorance here. I mean, I can make assumptions, but like, what is the primary purpose of the dog? Like, I mean, it's a tool, I'm guessing, to help you, but is it to, like you said, create a distraction or to disarm or to keep them at bay so that you're not, to keep you safer? I know there's dogs that do sniffing for bombs or narcotics or whatever, but I mean like specifically like a bite dog.
Right. Well, when I had my two dogs, they were just like human detection. So they were apprehension dogs.
Okay.
They weren't in narcotics. Now they cross-train a lot of dogs. But dogs, especially canines and German Shepherds or Malinois, they have very keen sense of hearing, incredible eyesight, and their nose is probably 10 to 20,000 greater scent power than a human being. So that they can smell somebody from hundreds of yards away. They can do ground disturbance. I think a lot of times when people flee, you know, that they're shedding skin follicles, they're picking up the skin follicles. Also, if a dog's seasoned, they will understand the person who's committed a crime and fleeing. They have an odor called a fear scent.
Mm-hmm.
There's glands in the body that will emit a certain odor. And a seasoned dog understands, like bacon frying in a pan, buddy. And once they've been out there, they've had a couple good street bites, they know what's going on. And so once you season a dog, you've got a heck of a machine there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've done a couple courses in the military, but it was getting away from dogs.
Right.
And it was always like, you don't beat the dog, you beat the handler.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you drag them through terrible circumstances, and the guy's just like, I'm not going in that.
Right.
Whatever, he's good. Let him go.
Right.
You know, they're, in my opinion, one of the best tools in law enforcement, military. Because again, it just mitigates, you know, danger for the handler, right? If I can send my dog into a structure and he can find a guy hiding in the back room, then it allows us to slowly move through our way and be more safe. You know, it amazes me still the amount of people that think they can out hide a dog with their odor, you know, their fear scent, the ground disturbance, and they're just phenomenal tools. So I just want to bring that up because I think that's a really cool part of your career.
Well, and before we get off the topic of the dogs, your dog was exceptional, Bosco. I dog sit for him a couple times while I was sheriff, and I could take Bosco to my office, out of the car, no lead, and he'd follow me. And he'd actually track me down. He'd walk, stuck, and see where I was. He'd go right in my office, lay down by my desk, and then all the office girls loved on him the whole time. He loved being attended to.
Yeah, he did.
But to have that dog with that great discipline was unbelievable. And I was also there when he got a hold of some bad guys, so I saw the other side of his personality. And so he won all the wars, trust me. And but did a heck of a job. I mean, he was known as you don't mess with Bosco.
Yeah.
But he could also be at the house at a swimming pool party with kids and everybody else just hanging out there, buddy, like a part of the family, like a kid. So you were fortunate. You had a hell of a dog.
We did. I was very fortunate. It was, again, probably the best time of my career is both my dogs. It was just
absolutely. And one last thing, I like to give shout outs to Dave Mollinette, Tim Neusmeyer, Brian Hildebrandt, for all the work they did with me when I was in K-9 Young, because we'd meet out late at night while we were all working. And those three did a lot of work with me. And they were like the guy who ran for me when you had to have your officer running as the bad guy.
Right.
And I trusted those three so much. They did such a great job for me. So Dave, Tim, and Brian, I can't thank them enough.
They're great people.
What's a typical career length for a dog?
I think probably an average length of time is maybe 7 to 9 years if you're lucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
For a
you-
working dog.
So you get them pretty young then? Like when do they start? About a year, 2 years old, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's changed over the years too, right? And what's available. But both of my dogs were about a year and a half, 2,
Okay.
when they came over from the check.
Yeah.
You know, they get a little training over there, but really it's here. You know, that we would train them locally, and then it was continuous training. So
Yeah.
um,
Gotcha.
again, yeah, just love them. So I just want to touch base because that was a really cool part of your career. So you get through K9, you know, you start making rank. Like, what does that look like as you're coming up, like testing and going to the next phase? And
Well, whenever I was promoted to sergeant, I think in the late 80s or possibly very early 90s. And that was a big change because I was a young guy taking over a squad in the old days. And in the old days, being the sergeant, you was the only one out there because you're working night shift, lieutenant's not there very often, and you ran the county as a sergeant, and you was a young guy, and you had to make sure you had buy-in from your fellow deputies. And we had a hell of a crew. You know, we had Mike Taylor, Charlie Lavanci as part of our crew, and had some great deputies working with me. So I'd say we were tougher than the average group of people at that time. And we finally, as we worked together, we created a good bond, which is very beneficial for us. And I enjoyed that part of being in law enforcement. It was so fun. And people will forget, back when I was a young deputy, if you went out the Lloyd Expressway, when you got to Green River Road, everything east and north, that was county
Oh yeah.
until city gobbled it all up for tax purposes.
right.
But we took care of all of that, and there was a lot of stuff out there. And but we didn't have the population base in northern Vanderbilt County at the time. If you went to Boonville, New Harmony, and Petersburg Road, it was cornfields. And now it's a sprawling, you know, metropolis-looking thing. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable, the growth in northern Vanderbilt County. But back then, we had much more area to patrol, a lot less people.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, I'm sitting here. You were talking about, you know, your old cars and kind of the gear you had back in the day, and looking at it now with GPS and radios and, you know, all the communication that we have. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, like, how did you guys get anything done back then? You know, but it's like, I don't know if you want to speak on it. It's just wild to think.
It's a good
of.
question. We did a lot of grassroots work, and you had to use your head, work very hard. You didn't rely on technology to solve things for you. And a lot of times it was just kicking the bushes. And everybody knows in law enforcement, the propensity for us to actually roll up on a real crime in progress is maybe 5% of your patrol time.
Sure.
You don't roll up on very many crimes in progress as a police officer. So, but we did. I mean, we had some, and every now and then, if an alert neighbor saw something going on and we were fairly close, we could catch somebody breaking into cars. And that's what we had a lot of, like, car break-ins and things like that, some burglaries late at night. And we were fortunate enough to apprehend a few people during things like that. But yeah, we certainly didn't have the technology that they have today. And you had to work a little extra hard.
Yeah. Just good old fashioned police work. It's kind of
Exactly.
what it was, right?
Yeah.
Talking
That's
to
what I
people.
was. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking in my head. I just didn't want to say it out loud. It almost probably made you a little bit better of a cop or a police officer or a deputy.
Well, and something else, as a young deputy sheriff, when you saw something that looked very, very suspicious, your gut feeling told you, like, if I saw an old beat up car coming out of a nice subdivision at 2:30 in the morning, they're going to get their butt stopped by me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to cross the center line. They're going to, if I found the slightest infraction, they're getting pulled over because I knew they were up to no good. And because of my instinct, I was generally right. And I caught people who just broken into cars, broken into garages, things like that, through a traffic stop by being very assertive and using my instinct to solve crimes. Where now we have some, what we think are highly trained police officers that would watch a crime go right by them when they know it.
Yeah.
You know, so they got all this technology and all this training, but no, kind of like I reference it to like a hunter. You either know how to hunt or you don't.
Yeah.
You can't take a guy and send him to hunter education school and go to high school and watch all these hunter classes and put him out in the woods versus the person who's grown up hunting.
Yeah.
With his father and brothers, and then they're out in the woods. They know how to hunt.
Yeah.
And that's what I think police officers are no different. You have to have that gut instinct in you, and you have to want to catch a dirtbag and put their butt in jail. and get a thrill out of that. It's kind of like me catching a big bass. When I caught a criminal, I got a rush out of that.
Sure.
And I loved it. I mean, there's no better feeling than taking a dirt bag off the street. And I wish we had more people. But you have some people that could care less if they do or not. I mean, I think we hire police officers nowadays. They don't know anything about police. They've never shot a gun in their life, never been in a fight. And it's hard to train those people.
I bet.
To handle stressful situations. I feel, and I'm not saying everybody, because there's very good police officers. Don't get me wrong. And there's good deputy sheriffs. But also I've seen some of the not so good, and with all these cruel hiring standards and all the extra education we give them, and they're still not as good as some of the old school cops.
That's what it seems. It seems like there's all this extra education and training and technology and new ways of doing everything, and you wonder if it's helping or hurting, at the end of the day. And you could apply that to anything, right? Not just law enforcement, but it's just a crazy thought to me. And I was wondering earlier, I don't mean to back up too far, but you were talking about the training that you were going through. And I know, everybody, Marine Corps background, everybody always talks about how, the old Corps, how it used to be hard. I went to the last hard boot camp,
Right.
There's always, everybody's was tougher than yours. Right. But a lot of the services across, or a lot of the boot camps or basic training across the services, there were some standards getting played with a little bit. I think the Marine Corps stayed pretty steady, and we still have the same kind of results coming out of there. But do you see was there a big disparity, I guess, with I don't know what you guys would call your boot camp, the academy, or the training? Is it longer? Is it shorter? Is it easier standards from what you've seen when you went in to where they're at now? I'm just wondering if that has anything to play in this.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when I went to the academy in 1983, I was in real good shape. I was powerlifting.
I'm just going to say this real quick. I was born in 1983. Okay. It's been on.
I'm an old dog.
Yeah.
But, I was very in tune. I thought the academy was going to be a big challenge. We was going to work our butts off and everything.
Yeah.
And they'd get us up in the morning, and then we'd go play volleyball in the gym. And I thought we was going to go be push-ups and sit-ups and racing and everything, And I was vice president. I even went to our academy director. I said, "Hey, look, what's up? You're getting us up early in the morning, like we're supposed to be serious training to be good police officers, and we're playing volleyball."
Yeah.
I said, "Shouldn't we be doing something harder and more stressful and put more demands on us?" And he literally looked at me and said, "Dave, we've got to get everybody to graduate. And we can't be tough on them because they won't graduate.
If that becomes the standard, it becomes a problem."
And I start scratching my head back in 1980. Here I'm a young kid thinking, that's.
Yeah.
And later on, as I was a sheriff, I was assigned as a member of the Academy Indiana Law Enforcement Training Board. And during my time there, I questioned the entire staff in the training board, said, why do we have standards? What's the purpose of standard? And they just kind of looked at me puzzled. I said, how in the world can we have somebody run 1.5 miles, a new police applicant, and give them 16.5 minutes to run 1.5 miles, which means they're walking? I said, if they're walking, they're quitting. And if they're quitting while they're an applicant or an academy student, well, they're going to be like 5 years down the road and they're eating all the free buffets.
Yeah.
They're going to be a bum, a fat bum. And I said, because we actually had people lobby us when they didn't pass their exit standard to get another chance to do it. And I said, absolutely not.
Is it exit standard? That's before you can become a cop.
Yeah,
or
that
police
means
officer.
a full certified police officer from the academy. You have to
Okay.
go through the written test and firearms and all
Gotcha.
that stuff. And yeah, just make push-ups and sit-ups and things like that. But 16 minutes, about 1.5 miles. I'm 60, almost 7 years old. I think if you paid me, I'd run 1.5 miles in 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm 67 years old with a bad hip. But these people literally, they're walking, and they used to make me so upset. And you can't put a value on their physical testing. So in other words, if they barely make 16 minutes and something, but they pass the 1.5 miles, but they only get an 88 on the written test, the other guy gets a 94. Theoretically, the guy with 94 looks better, even though the guy with the 94 took 16:33. This guy might have ran the 1.5 miles in 9 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So, because I think part of being a good cop is being fit.
Sure.
And mentally stable, not just being a bookworm, right? Memorizing tests.
Yeah.
Because when the shit hits the fan, you need that guy who's been there and get down the trenches and work. And also, if you get in a fight, people don't realize that a 60-second fight can take it out of you.
Oh yeah.
If you're not in shape.
Oh, yeah.
60-second fight. So I'm thinking, if you can't run a mile and a half in 16 and a half minutes, we got serious problems.
Oh yeah.
And so I question, but nobody ever could answer why we have standards. Because I would probably rewrite standards or do away with them all.
Yeah.
We're either going to have fitness standards you have to pass or do away with them.
Yeah, I mean, you just made me think this. So my brother's a cop in Newburgh, and I remember him telling me, I don't know if he experienced this or he heard about this. I don't want to mess up the story, but there was a standard or a test on how fast you could get out of your car. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, it's like from sitting in a cruiser, unbuckling and getting out in like 3 seconds. And there was guys who failed it because they were so out of shape or overweight they couldn't get out of their car that fast. And it was like, if that is a test you have to run, there's a problem with the whole thing, you know. But I guess and I don't know, maybe I'm just making all this up, but I'm pretty sure he told me that story. So I just thought that was bizarre.
I think, and that's part we'll touch on shortly, is just how society's changed, right? And how we've softened everything to make people feel a certain way instead of saying this is the standard, and if you don't pass it, this isn't the job for you.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, instead of giving multiple chances, like my kids in school, they fail a test, they can take it until they pass it. I'm like, what? When did we start doing that?
Right.
No, you failed it. You better study better next time and pass it. But they can just keep retaking it. And I think that's what's kind of came into that as well. So jump ahead here because I do want to talk about like society and some of the things that you've seen. So you moved through your career, and like I said, you were a lieutenant when I started, and then you know the chief and how all that looks. So what, like when you became the chief under Eric Williams, and then decided like what made you start to want to run for sheriff? How'd that look like?
Well, my plan originally was when Sheriff Williams was going to leave office, I was going to retire. I was going to be 55 years old, 32 years, chief deputy. I thought, finishing second on the tier, I was going to be happy with that. And you remember my brother Tom?
Oh, absolutely.
He starts bothering me, says to run for sheriff, and he said, "You need to run. I think people want you to run for sheriff." And then I had some other people in the community approach me to run, and I actually had a job lined up that I was going to go to instead of running for sheriff. And I got more and more people say, "Run, please run. We want you to run for sheriff." So it was kind of a good feeling to know people trusted me to run, because it's not an easy job. And so I decided to run for sheriff. But once again, I was 55 years old, full retirement age. And then everything just went on from there.
Yeah. Well, we're all, those that worked on here, we're glad you did. So jumping in that, like, so, is obviously the top part of that leadership chain. And, there's a lot that comes with that. I remember days us having a conversation, you say you get 200 emails in a day, right? Yeah. There's a huge workload, I'm sure, being the sheriff, that people have no idea, right? They think it's just going out and doing this and that, showing your face. There's a lot more to that. And there's a lot of weight that comes with that, because everybody that's out on patrol, everybody that's in special investigations, all that, it typically, it does fall on you, right? Mm-hmm. So, jumping into that leadership part, like, how was that a change? Like, now you're the man, right? You're responsible for, I think when I left, there was 120 some deputies, maybe somewhere around there. Like, what did that look like?
Well, what happens when you're the sheriff, you're basically the CEO of a company. So the buck stops with you. So anything that happens under you, you're liable for, plain and simple. And we had nearly 300 employees with the deputies, jail officers, civilians, community corrections staff. We took care of the courts, the jail, patrol, your task force, schools. We did a whole lot of stuff. And it was difficult because we had some less than desirable employees that if I could have just plucked them all off one by one, I would have. It made me a hand-picked law enforcement agency, but I couldn't do that. But I'd got more people that were minds like me that wanted to work. We had people calling sick, 9, 15 days a year when they're not really sick and just abusing their sick time. You couldn't really do anything. And I was a real stickler about taking off sick. I just never took off sick. And I thought you should care enough about your people and not to call sick. You leave everybody short-staffed. You got to cover it with overtime. Somebody gets called in. And it's it's not good for morale whenever somebody's getting forced to work because somebody's too lazy to come to work. Because we have the sheriff's office, like a lot of police agents, have very good time off policies, very good. So that was something that bothered me. And then I'd also see things in the community. What used to trouble me was just like University of Southern Indiana, a large college campus way out middle of nowhere between Vandenberg and Posey County line, basically. And I'd met with their officials multiple times, and I suggested they get police officers on campus. Well, we'll think about it. I said, no, I said, with all the shootings going on at school campuses in the United States, and I said, you're one of the few large institutions of education that I know that don't have police officers. Well, we have some people come out and work off duty occasionally. I said, no, I'm talking you need a police force on your campus that knows every nook and cranny. So when all hell breaks loose, those people know where to go immediately. They can respond immediately. If we're sending a squad car from Red Bank and the Lloyd and they get to the campus, they tell you that they're at their health and science building or the David Rice Library, the average deputy wouldn't know where the hell to go. And now you got crucial seconds ticking where somebody's hurting somebody. And basically almost got into it with the university about why they needed law enforcement. And they finally said, yes, we do it. They got a grant and we put 5 deputy sheriffs on their campus and we needed more, but that's all they would pony up for. But at least we had some deputy sheriffs because I felt a duty as a sheriff to protect that campus with the large number of students out there. Why they couldn't see that. These are educators. They're supposed to have all these degrees and doctors and things, and they can't figure out that we need law enforcement to protect our kids. I mean, they're our most precious commodity, in my opinion, being Absolutely. A parent, right? And if you guys are, same thing. So facing challenge like that where you do come up with something you think should be so simple and get so much pushback. And then we had an overcrowded jail. We had almost 788 inmates to take care of. I housed almost 200 outside in 7 jails, and I begged for 7 years to get a jail addition put on. And, well, we don't have the money. I said, well, we're spending almost $2 million a year housing them out. So we could be applying that toward this bill. And about the time I was retiring as a sheriff, we just got some money earmarked for the jail. And then now it's being built under Sheriff Robinson.
Good. Yeah, that's it's crazy just because I started in the old jail as well. And from the amount of people it would house to, when I left here, the new jail, I mean, it was unbelievable. And that's kind of what I want to jump into next is like, in your opinion, your years in law enforcement, like how in the hell did we end up where we're at as far as like, the crime rates, have increased, like we all know, like, what in your opinion, from what you've seen, like why?
Can I add a caveat to that? You just said 780 inmates. What was it like in the 80s?
Okay.
So I could compare the two.
Right. Well, I'm glad you asked that because in 1981, we had less than 200 inmates incarcerated. In about 2015 or 16, it was one of the years because we were actually housing level 6 felons with that House Bill 1006. They were having inmates serve these small felony sentences in our jail, which was a bad move. Instead of sending them to Department of Correction, they thought they'd save money up there. And they were just inundating jails with extra inmates, especially in certain counties because they rewrote the criminal code. We used to have murder, A, B, C, and D felonies. And then they changed it from murder, level 1 to level 6 felony. Level 6 being the lowest grade felony, almost like a hardened misdemeanor. Level 5 and up, they have to serve 75% of their sentences. Level 6s, they only have to serve 50% of their sentence. So it was a real good way to plea bargain a level 5 felony to level 6. So you cop the plea, you get a felony conviction, prosecutor gets stumped their chest, got another conviction, court clears their calendar, sheriff's office gets another prisoner to take care of. So we were bit in the butt by that. And I went and fought hard at the State House saying I thought that was the most ridiculous thing they ever did. And then they also came up with a formula to pay us for these inmates instead of a true inmate per day cost. And we were losing probably hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Well, that was your problem now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So obvious numbers there, right? Numbers don't lie. Yeah, so from when you were at the old jail to, when you left as sheriff, huge increase, right? How do we get there? Like, what have you seen over your career? Like, I know I have my opinion how we got there, but I want to hear like what have you seen?
Well, I think when you look from the 80s until present, our engineering has improved vastly, medicine's improved vastly, education has improved vastly, technology has improved vastly, but I think we have a decay of our families, and we also have a decay of discipline. We let people do bad things, and they don't suffer the true consequences for their bad behavior anymore. A perfect example, while I was sheriff, I think we were arresting nearly 10,000 people per year. Our pretrial detainee balance was about 600 and some change. Pretrial detainee balance, and the other ones were like serving on holds, contempts, parole violations, probation violations, level 6 felony. But so if you just took the number down to 600 out of 10,000, the simple math is we were letting 94% of offenders out like that. 94% of offenders. They could commit a burglary and get a $500 bond 2 days later. And I always said, as the sheriff, I didn't want an A rating letting people out of jail. Give me a D rating, buddy. Because I thought I owe it to the community. If somebody makes you a victim of a crime, I want to help punish that person. I want them to have an immediate consequence for their bad behavior. Yeah. And incarceration is an end to the means, right? Or a means to the end, a means to the end. So, but we let people out. Oh, they don't need to be in jail. And there's some of these left-wing folks that believe if it's a property crime, they don't need to be incarcerated. Only violent people need to be incarcerated. And I couldn't further agree with that. Or, let me strike that. I disagree with that strongly. When you commit a crime against a person or property, there should be a consequence. And I think it should be incarceration.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So obviously I think we've relaxed, right? I guess the punishment, people know they can go do a robbery and, hey, no worries, in 2 days I'll be out on $500 bond, right? And then I go do it again, right? There is no immediate consequence really. And the thing that you hit on is really what I guess I preach to people all the time. I think it all starts at home, it's the parents. Like, what are we teaching our kids? How are we holding them accountable? Like, are we, are they getting consequences when they do bad things? Because we know that becomes a pattern and they carry that throughout their life. And, and it seems like more recently I get really frustrated because, there's been a big topic lately of the amount of crime in Evansville, and everybody wants to point at the police. Well, just as a reminder, the police show up after the fact. Right. We don't create the crime, right? These kids and these people, and that seems to be a lot of it these days, is these violent crimes. At the end of my career, it seems like weekly we were going after 15, 16-year-old people that shot people. Yeah, I can't fathom that. Yeah. I can't fathom that.
I'm just in the news recently, there's like 14, 15-year-olds doing this. And I'm like, man, when I was 14, 15 years old, my mind would be nowhere near doing something.
I'm playing baseball, somewhere, and I'm playing
video games, hanging
football
out,
somewhere.
Cheetos, yeah, like.
But again, though, in your home, you were taught what's right, what's wrong, and you were held accountable when you did something wrong. And I think that's where, in my opinion, where we've really lost our way and why society wonders why we're at. That's a big piece of it.
Well, and I think we're always trying to figure out why people do things, and oftentimes they mitigate their crime by, was brought up in a bad home, or they got hurt when they were younger, or this happened. But human beings were all born with a conscience. So you can have the worst life in the world, but we still usually know what's right and wrong. Yeah. So I never want to hear that as the reason why somebody did something, because we all go through a lot of pains in our life. But that don't mean we'll go out and hurt somebody because somebody did us wrong. But a lot of people try to accept their behavior, saying, well, they had a rough life, therefore I can forgive them for doing that. And I don't buy that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's probably some contributing factors maybe there, right? But I would probably even say, like, some of these recent things you see on the news, right? Well, this person lived a horrible life, so okay, he did. He had it bad growing up. He still did a crime, and he still needs to be punished for it, right?
That's right.
Now, you can still have empathy for what that person, to the circumstances they were raised in, which is awful, right? But it still doesn't. I don't think it takes away from the actual crime that happened, right? I don't know if that makes sense to you guys.
No, it makes perfect sense, because if that same person commits a crime against one of our children's or family and does serious harm or kills us, I could give a shit what kind of family they grew up in.
Exactly.
They killed my family member.
Yeah.
I want the worst case scenario for them. I don't care what they grew up in.
Well, it's like,
took my family
sometimes
from-
when you try to show so much empathy for someone's situation, all you're really doing, I think, is taking away. You're almost like sacrificing somebody else's situation for their. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
trying to think of the best way to say that. Like, the victim is getting sacrificed because of someone's circumstances, right? Like, you care more about, you know, their upbringing than you do this person who was just harmed, who was just minding their own business, right? You're sacrificing that for the other, and it's just doesn't seem like the right way to do anything.
Yeah. And that, you know, I think that, you know, we talk a lot about a lot. It's just the problems in this country or whatever. In my opinion, again, I think a big piece of that is social media. And I think that has really been over the years, had an impact on the way that people look at law enforcement, what they think our real job is compared to, you know, what it really is. And I would like you to speak on that because, you know, listen, I'm going to be completely upfront. Mental health's a real thing.
Right.
It is a real thing. There's people out there that need help. There's people out there that jail is not the place, right?
Yep.
But as in law enforcement, it's not really I'm not trained. I haven't been to these schools to understand how your brain works, whatever, right? I'm there to stop a problem, right? And put you where you need to be. And that's it. You know, I think that there's a big push, you know, we're going to send social workers and stuff with police, which great. But I can tell you many runs I was on, that social worker wouldn't want any part of that.
No, absolutely.
Not even nothing.
Nope.
Right.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do we,
Well, the mental crisis that we face is not new. In 1981, we had an area that we kept our mental inmates. It was basically, if you remember the old jail, the 21, 22, and 23 area, they were held back there, and it was deplorable conditions. It eroded their mental health drastically by their conditions, by isolating them in a steel and concrete box with no proper treatment. And as much as people say that we can do this, this, and this, when you build a jail, you build it on the smallest footprint you can, the cheapest way you can do it. Everybody's fighting over tax dollars for incarceration. So they never build anything properly to start out with. In the old days, I call it, the Evansville State Hospital was a thriving place. And in the 80s, we literally would pick people up from Wellborn Hospital. They had a mental health wing there. And we would take court-ordered inmates that would be detained normally to jail. We would take them to the Evansville State Hospital, and they had a place they could take a violent, mentally ill person. Now they don't have places like that where they could take a violently, mentally ill person. I've talked to many judges, including Judge Trockman, who would say, Dave, I apologize for having this person incarcerated with you, but we have no choice. And for us to let this person go out on the street, they're a danger to themselves and certainly to the public. You're the only place we can keep them safe from themselves and from other people. And then let's say they get an evaluation. It takes 36 days to get an evaluation. Then you got to wait 36 days to get the evaluation back. And then they read it, assess it, and they say, okay, let's send this person to Logansport State Hospital. So they make a call to Logansport State Hospital. Logansport politely tells us, we'll call you when we have a bed available. Mm-hmm. So that means we could have a severe mentally ill person in jail for anywhere from 60, 90, and 120 days. And if you remember the lady who committed the arson at Sugar Mill Creek Apartments years ago and, got up in the attic and burned everything, I think she was found to be very mentally ill. And they sent her to an institution, and they were done with her. I don't know how it worked out, but they brought her to our jail. And she stayed curled up in a fetal position in our medical wing for months. Urinate on herself, defecate on herself, wasn't able to communicate audibly with us. It was the worst travesty I've ever seen in my life. But nobody wanted her. There was no place to take her. She needed to be in a group home or something. But we were stuck with her in our jail. And it was a horrible burden on my staff. And I felt sorry for her. I felt sorry for my staff. But everybody wants to tease the idea of mental health and say how great we're doing, but we're failing miserably. One time the state had offered like $10 million for mental health for the jails. And one of my friends from the Allen County Sheriff's Office, Troy Hirschberger, he laughed and said, "Is that for one county?" And they're like, "Well, you what?" There's 91 counties that have jails. That 10 million isn't going to go very far for resources and paying salaries and things like that. And they just looked at us like they thought they were really going to dangle this carrot and put 10 million into mental health, and that wouldn't have scratched the surface.
So back in the day, I remember the state hospital, and we used, I think I would say America as a whole had institutions where you could keep criminally insane or people with mental issues that were potentially violent or dangerous, right? You could keep them in facilities like that so you didn't have to put them in jail or prison. Is that, that's my understanding. And so the state hospital here right off Lincoln was the same thing for a while. And I guess at which point in time do they stop taking those types of people?
They severely cut the funding, staffing, and participants to the state hospital probably maybe either late 90s, early 2000 or something like that. I can't remember the exact year, but it was a drastic change. And they have a small state hospital, but they certainly don't treat violent people. And even some hospitals, and Bryan, you know this, they wouldn't take a violent person. If they couldn't be controlled, they said, nope, take them to jail.
So what? So now the answer is either let them go or send them to jail where they, I'm sure it's not as bad as that lady you were just describing happens now, but still, that seems like, it's like, what do you do?
Right.
Where do you put them?
Well, when you have jokes in the jail, when they release somebody and they're all betting on when that person is going to return because of their mental state of mind, you got a problem.
Oh, yeah.
When they're literally putting up money saying, I'll give a day, 24 hours, less than 12 hours, this person's going to be back in our jail because they know they're unfit to be released. And they don't have family, they don't have anybody care for them, and nobody wants them. The mental health problem is a problem that's much greater than the resources we have to deal with it, I'm telling you. And you can play with it all you want, say you're going to do all this feel-good, warm, fuzzy stuff, but at the end of the day, you got to overhaul the whole system to fix it, I'm telling you.
What a mess. I did not. I remember the state hospital. I used to roll around there all the time. A buddy of mine used to live over there by it. And you would get all these calls like, "Oh, inmates got out and they escaped and all of this." And so, man, I thought that they were talking about bringing those things back here recently. Having a place for like homeless or mentally ill people who are homeless, instead of just shuffling them around or letting them stay outside and eventually die from the weather. Having a place for them to go and just keeping them there against their will,
right?
Until they got better or they just, I don't know. I don't have the answers for that one. That's a tough one.
Right. Well, and I think Bryan knows, and I know there's a gentleman named Daniel Clark that lived on the street probably over 20 years. He's lived under the Pigeon Creek Bridge. He lived here, he lived there, and traveled from convenience store to convenience store, and apparently had enough money to survive, but he chose to be homeless. And he took care of himself, but it was a sad situation. But he definitely has some mental issues. Mm-hmm. And the problem with him, the way he looked, he would scare people. So if he was around convenience stores hanging out, the convenience store people didn't care. He'd get a soft drink and hang out, go in and get warm occasionally. But he hung out on the street. But he created a lot of problems. People were afraid of him. And he gravitated from Pigeon Creek Bridge clear up to 64 and 41, and just kept moving north and getting pushed around because people were afraid of him. And he's been, you recall him, right?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Good person, right? Yeah. He really was never a problem. Right. He's just a little different, right? So, just kind of, I guess, put this all together, I really wanted to really focus on like how crime was and how it's changed. And then like in your position, like how do we get back to controlling crime? What does that look like? What, is it a leadership thing? Is it a, I don't know. I don't know what that looks.
Well, I can tell you the easy solution. Stop apologizing for being police. And if it means going in and kicking a little ass occasionally, if that's going to make our city and county safer, then go kick some ass. We're always apologizing for doing our damn job. I remember years ago we had some gang members from Chicago trying to start drug trafficking down in the inner city. We made more controversial stops on those jerks than I've ever seen. But guess what? They didn't set up SOP down. They probably thought these redneck cops down here, and they left.
Right.
But I remember very clearly that there was a big thing. They thought they were going to run our downtown Evansville with a bunch of gangbangers. And I'm going to say, you have to treat people good. You have to treat them professionally. But a good cop knows a criminal. They know a suspicious car. They know suspicious characters. And where we've been, the Supreme Court really handcuffed us when we are not allowed to stop and ask somebody for identification. Like, I live in subdivision. If I see two people walking around, their pants falling off and hoodies on at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm a police officer, if you live in that neighborhood, would you think I should have a duty to find out who they are and why they're walking around the neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning? Well, under the law, you can't. They can say, hey, I'm walking around here. I'm not doing anything. Get the hell out of here. And we have to leave. In the old days, you would get arrested for failing to identify. It was a crime to not identify yourself to a police officer. And how we did that or did away with that is unbelievable. Because a good cop knows that looks suspicious. And if you don't think that looks suspicious as a police officer, then you shouldn't be driving around a squad car.
Absolutely.
You should know what looks suspicious. I said a police officer knows what looks criminal by being a good cop, not by being some person that sits there and watches TV shows all night long.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're out in the street doing your job, you become a good cop if you've got the instinct to be a good police officer. And as a citizen, I think you want a police officer that errs on being a little more aggressive to keep you safe than being complacent, and then you become a victim of a burglary or a severe crime. And one of the case in point is the Haney lady who was killed by the dirtbag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we got a law passed now because of all that. But why do we wait and have to do things after the fact? Why don't we be proactive to protect our community?
Absolutely.
Say, you know what, we're going to make this a safer place. If you're in a weird place at a weird time, we want to allow the police to find out who you are.
Yeah. And we talked about it prior to the podcast, but like Giuliani, the way that, crime was so crazy in New York, and he was like, we're done.
Right.
Like, we're stopping frisking. We are just going to make it uncomfortable for criminals.
Right.
And that's what they did. And look what change it made, you know, and in my opinion, that, again, we should treat everybody with respect, right? We should know, what their rights are. But when things aren't right, they're not right. And at that point, I don't care really if you're offended if I'm stopping you at 2 a.m. because you're walking through a neighborhood and something's not right.
Right.
And the people that defend that, they defend it until they're a victim of that. And then it matters. Right. And I think that seems to be, especially with social media, which I think has been the huge downfall of our country. Everybody wants to get on there and put their opinions in this and that and what law enforcement should be. They've never walked in our shoes.
Exactly.
They've never confronted somebody at 2 a.m. in an alley where you have that beating heart and you're like, I could die right now.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
They defend it because it's not happening in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Absolutely.
You
right.
know?
Well, their ignorance. Their ignorance. And when I say ignorant, ignorant means you're lacking knowledge. They don't know what's going on in the law enforcement world. I said, some people confuse ignorance and stupidity, right?
Right.
But when you're ignorant, you just lack knowledge. And I don't want somebody who has zero knowledge of law enforcement to try to dictate how we police, right? The police profession should dictate how we police and how we can make our community safer. And to me, that should be the number one job of law enforcement. How do we make our community safer? Because a safer community is a more thriving community, plain and simple. Nobody wants to live in a rundown, nasty neighborhood, broken windows theory, things like that. Nobody wants to live there. They want to come somewhere where they feel safe. They can go out and do things. I did this talk one time. I was asking people about coming to a luncheon and asked people who all had to lock their doors when they left their house. They all raised their hand. Who all has cameras on the outside of their house? They raise their hand. Who's got Ring doorbells and all that? They raise their hand. I said, you parked in the parking lot coming here? Yeah. Did you lock your doors on your car when you came into this luncheon? Yeah. And I said, that's pretty sad. You had to lock up everything to come for an hour-and-a-half luncheon. Why is that? Because we're afraid it's going to get stolen. And we shouldn't have to live in that much fear that something's going to get stolen. But once again, you got that one faction that says, it's just property, who cares?
Yeah.
Well, I care. I don't want my property bothered, damaged, stolen.
Yeah.
And I think most citizens feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah. I think everybody deserves to live in a high trust society,
Right.
right? And that's what keeps it like that, so you don't have to necessarily lock everything up.
Correct.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, it's been an honor, and I, like I said, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to serve on you under you, because, you know, there's nothing like knowing you have a good leader to take your back. And I think that across policing in general, you know, across the country, you know, you've seen a lot of police officers like, I'm done, right? They're not going to do their job because they're afraid of getting in trouble. You know, Monday morning quarterback. And, you know, there's a big difference of being involved in a situation and trying to make decisions in that chaos compared to Monday morning looking at the video. I'm like, well, you should have did this. Well, you weren't there, man. You weren't processing all that as quick as I was. So, you know, it was always good to know, you know, I was fortunate, worked under Ellsworth, Eric Williams, and you, and, you know, I'm grateful that I had that opportunity, and just knowing that you as a leader had our backs, you know, because I don't, you know, not here locally, but across the board, I think that seems to be a common occurrence now, unfortunately, just from cops that I talk to in Indianapolis or different places. They're done. Right. And people ask me, you know, I want to go in law enforcement. I'm like, man, there's a lot to it. You should think through that. Right. It's not what it was, you know, when we were growing up, where it was just my everyday, you know, I just want to take bad guys off the street. That's all I want to do, you know, because.
Yeah. And you had one of the more dangerous jobs in the office, being in that marshal task force. You guys probably had more serious criminal violators that you took off the street. You had more gun encounters. Your canine was used much more than everybody else's dogs. So you had a very dangerous job. And I thought, as a sheriff, if I don't 100% support you for the dangerous job you do, then I'm not worth a hoot. I had to trust you guys, and I was glad to see you doing the job you did. And when we had special circumstances arise, our marshals task force generally rose to the occasion. They almost served as our special operations teams because of your training. And you took care of a lot of business for us.
Yeah, no, it was definitely the best time of my life. And, you know, again, like you, I mean, we just want to get bad guys off the street, and that it was about for us, you know, making the things safer. So,
and if I said one thing, and if I can close from my end, you know, I think I've been a caring person for the community. I've always supported underprivileged children's causes, raised a lot of money for people. Over the police officers been in trouble, I've always done fundraising quickly to try to help them out in time of need. I've always tried to support my deputy sheriffs and confinement officers and staff. And my goal was always to try to build a safer community for the residents of Vanderbilt County. And I hope I did a reasonable job at it. I wouldn't say I was anything spectacular, but I tried my best.
And it was obvious, and we appreciate it. And again, man, I appreciate your 40 plus years of service. That's a long time to be in that career.
It was.
And it, you know, I tell people all the time, there's no way you can go through that career and it changes you. There's no way around it.
It really does.
So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, Dave, again, I appreciate you being here, and thank you for your time.
Well, thanks to both of you. It was great talking to both of you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Watch and the War.